This and every episode of the AVB Podcast is brought to you by the Dugout Sports Lounge in downtown Windsor. You can find me in the basement corner of OLED and University on the second Saturday of every month, but they have great live music Tuesday through Saturday every week and all the games you're looking to see. Great new items are being added to their already incredible menu, and you do not want to miss it. We're also brought to you by the fine folks at Edward Hayes Lighting in Ford City. If you're looking to light up your life, get down to Edward Hayes Lighting and say hi to my good friend, Tina Kennedy. She'll set you up with the most stylish lighting designs your heart desires, and while you're there, make sure you check out some of the incredible work that Kalen Schaub did for us while he was down here, including an incredible painted guitar that has to be seen in person. Edward Hayes Lighting, Tina Kennedy, make sure you say hi, tell him AJ sent you. The AVB Podcast is proud to announce we've joined the Border City Network. Please find more at bordercitynetwork.com. Okay, folks, let's get to our show. This episode of the AVB Podcast, we are back here at Christian Aldo's place with researcher and musician, Mr. Shane Miersch. How's it going, man?
Very well.
How'd I do with the last name? I'm terrible with names.
Actually, pretty good.
Oh, yes.
Better than average.
All right.
I appreciate it. I know there's a lot of superfluous letters in there. So.
Hey, dude, with a guy with 13 characters in his last name in two separate words, I feel your pain.
Yeah.
So, the way we ended up here, I might as well say right off the top, is when George and I started talking about this tour. He started telling me about yourself and about your history in the city, and the fact that you were that you're here in Toronto, and I was fascinated just by the vastness of the things that you seem to be interested in. Mm-hmm. So before we get into all of that, I'm going to start with you the same way I start with all of my guests. Sure. I want to know about the house you grew up in. Tell me about being a kid. Do you have mom and dad, brothers and sisters, that kind of thing?
Okay. So the delving back into the distant past now. My childhood was a little.
Where was it?
Now, I was actually born in Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And,
great.
I grew up there. I spent the first 12 years of my life there. My parents separated very early, and we kind of moved around a fair bit.
Okay.
So.
Who'd you live with?
I lived with my mom.
Primarily,
and, for the most part, that was a good thing, I think. Visiting my dad, every couple of weeks, and so that was.
How young were you when they split?
I think it was like 2.
Oh, so like you don't have
before.
So it was always just life to you?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and I, obviously, we were 17 months apart. So
wow.
We were terrors, I think. The uncorralled wildness of young boys, and
right.
So we caused lots of trouble. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for all the heartache and headache we probably caused you over the years. So that was I spent 12 years there.
That was Niagara Falls.
Okay. And I do remember actually getting into performing arts even at that age.
Really?
Yeah, I had an aunt who was married to a director at the time, and I did a stint in
theater director?
Theater director,
okay.
Musical theater actually, and
okay.
I played Randolph McAfee in a play called Bye Bye Birdie.
I have been in maybe 6 plays in my life, mm-hmm. and in some of the plays I played multiple characters, and I couldn't tell you one name of a character I played through the entire time.
Serious, yeah.
I've always been fascinated. Guys like you that have done theater and acting and stuff like that are able to just rattle off this is the name of this character that I played in this, and it seemed to me to be the same kind of people that could name every character in Star Wars. I've seen that movie a million times. I'm lucky to remember Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
It was just not one of the way I sort of interacted with the world. That's
I totally understand. There's been, and I try to combat this reading books. There's been some books that I know, I love this book. This was a great book. Can I tell you the plot? Not one iota. And it's just I try to, when I read a book, to consciously take in the plot, understand, at least so I can go back and tell somebody the arc of the story.
Was that a thing you tried to do? Did you make any effort to sort of memorize those things, or was it just the natural result of whatever the hell you were doing?
More just the natural result.
God,
there is a conscious, because there is a lot of information that I take in that I consciously have to retain as best I can, and often as far as education goes, I always, when they say you drink from the fountain of knowledge, I've always thought that's not a very apt way of describing it. It's more like you are inundated from the fire hose of knowledge, and like
and you get what you keep.
Yeah, exactly. You're just trying to get a couple of drops that actually stay in your mouth during that point.
That's brilliant.
So, fortunately, I've managed to retain some information.
Okay, so moving around or not moving around. So at 12, you're in Niagara Falls. Where did you head from there?
Essex County.
Okay.
So my mom was originally from Leamington, Ontario.
All right.
That's where she grew up. Mm-hmm. So she had moved, and she wanted to return home to where there was a little bit more of a support system. So we moved to Essex, but then we still kind of continued the jumping around thing and moved from Essex to Leamington to Kingsville to the rural areas. The 5th concession in Kingsville.
Yeah, I grew up in River Canard, man.
So how quiet and subdued it can be, and
Was that a big change for you?
Huge change. Yeah. Niagara Falls at the time was like 80,000 people. No casino at the time, but it was still, for me, it was a big city. When you wake up in the middle of the night and you still hear, cars, horns, things moving around, moving out to a rural area. I don't know what it was like for you. I imagine there's two different types of people. Those who are who obtain solace from being in the city and hearing the noise, and those who obtain solace from being out in the rural areas where it's absolute quiet and the stars above you. So I was of the former, and didn't fare so well living out in the country.
Really? Yeah. Did you get antsy out there?
Yeah, it's a lot of anxiety, too much time to think, and not enough to do.
Yeah? Talk to me about your experience with that, because I'll tell you, you sort of asked a little bit, I guess. Like for me, growing up, because I grew up in the county. Like I grew up just down the street from St. Joseph's Church, like the church that's in all the paintings and stuff, right? Yeah. I grew up just down the street from it until I was 7. Then we moved to LaSalle, which is just a slight move up. Yeah. Because literally the house that I grew up in until I was 7, there was 3 houses on the street and farm fields. Yeah. Right? There was 2 little girls that lived up the street. Those were my friends for 7 years. Yeah. That's what we had. Yeah. And that was it. And occasionally there was a couple of other girls that moved into the house next door. So like all my friends were these like little girls that I grew up with. Yeah. And for me, it got, and then after LaSalle, we moved like directly into the subdivision behind that church. So like I grew up there, right? Yeah. And for me, it gave me this spot where like the first time I went into the city of Windsor, the big fucking city, right? I remember walking from my friend's house to the Palace Theater on Olette Avenue, and just being like, what is all of this? Like it was fascinating to me. So like I'm one of those people where if you plot me in a major city, I'm in love. Like being in Toronto right now is like I just walking around this morning just like, yes, right? Just watching the people and the crazy and everything, right? Yeah. Or you put me in the middle of nowhere where I can't see a human for 3 days. I'm happy. You put me in Windsor, I'm like, I don't, there's just enough to not be able to do. And there's not quite enough to get away. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like that's, right? Yeah.
Well, it's in many ways, it's kind of good because it puts you in this position, this, somewhat anxious, but also hungry to, it leaves you in a position where it's like, okay, I need to fill this time. I need sustenance. I need input. And also, you seem to be the type who also likes to create as well. Mm-hmm. So, when you're in that situation where a city, is familiar and doesn't, provide you with all the novelty that you need, you kind of turn it around and like, okay, I will create that novelty then, and that's so Windsor's got I think a little bit of both of that. Right. It's big enough that at first it's just like, wow, this is great, and then after you realize how small of a city in many ways that it is, that you kind of also turn it around. It's like, okay, well, now I need to create something. I need to create what doesn't exist for me.
I can imagine coming up in a place or even close enough to a place like Toronto, and I don't know if you have any perspective on this or not, but like I can imagine it could be tough to find your place in a city like this. Where like Windsor, it's not tough.
Imagine.
You're like, I want to be the asshole that does this. Well, there's you and one other guy. Fight it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like here, there's everybody, right?
Well, in Windsor, it's like, okay, if you are of the kind of creative, artistic, slant, then, really there's a relatively small community there. Probably bigger than I give it credit for.
Oh, yeah, no.
There's a lot of stuff going on that you don't realize.
Per capita, it's way too big than it should. It's way bigger than it should be, for sure.
Punches above its
weight.
weight.
100%, yeah.
So, but I've also had, I moved to the States a couple of times, and, when you drop into a city, there is that hunger. I have to orient myself. I have to find my crew, where I feel comfortable, where I have. So I think, after doing that a couple of times, it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And you kind of just drop into things organically, meet people, and then it just snowballs. Hopefully, that's the way.
So we went off on one of these random tangents, but you're going crazy in the county.
Yeah, so from there, Windsor was the next logical move, and so I moved there and lived there from the time I was 18. And I really speak to those years between 18 and 32 as the formative years.
Yeah.
That was where.
You said you were doing theater when you were in Niagara. Was there any sort of art? Was there any sort of like creativity for you while you're in the county and that sort of like no?
Nada. That was a black hole.
Yeah.
That was a black hole of just teenage adolescent misbehavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just acting out wherever you could out in the county.
Yeah.
So you tipped a cow.
Yeah. We wrecked some stuff. We fortunately never got caught for anything, and and managed to come through it relatively unscathed.
Yeah. So talk to me about your entrance into like the world of creativity in Windsor, because I know you were heavily active in like the music and art scene in Windsor for a while, right?
Yeah. I am. So I'm going to backpedal just a little bit, because it's really the origins of music for me was a group of people that I fell in with in Kingsville, who really kind of I felt embraced and like, okay, this is a fun community to be a part of. And it was the metalheads at the time, and
it's always the
metalheads, but they're the good people, and they had a lot of music going on. Guys like Ben Guthrie, Jason Henderson, Brad Doopy. These guys, old friends of mine from long ago, and they were playing Metallica covers of Megadeth and doing their own. And so that's when I was like, I want to play something.
And Dugout Head is back playing again.
Yeah. Those guys were in the early days in the other bands that they had, Mike Edwards too.
Yeah.
There was kind of inspirational to me and got me to, okay, I want to have a drum set. I want to play. But I, really between the ages of 18 and 25, I was a bedroom drummer strictly.
Yeah.
And it was only in Windsor when I finally started playing with people and kind of pushing and beyond.
How did the drum kit get to you then? Like, was that like?
It was actually my stepfather had an old Ludwig kit that I gave to me, or I bought from him, or something that I played in a barn when I was in Kingsville.
Yeah.
For a little while, and then to be honest, I'm not sure. There's some periods in there, some hazy periods where I'm like, I know I didn't have a drum set there. How was I playing? How did I keep that up at the time?
It's weird, eh? You just find a way sometimes as a kid.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost not entirely conscious. I imagine there's a conscious element to it, but the fact that it just kind of is pushed along and maintained through the years when so many people, I can't do that, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy. Somehow I managed to maintain
I became a punk rock drummer because I had spent, when I wanted to be, like when I was 5 years old, I wanted to be a drummer. I had like one of those Muppets animal drum kits or whatever that my uncle bought me to annoy my parents.
Yep.
And I bashed away on it, and I wanted to be a drummer. My parents brought me to go get music lessons, and they convinced me to go do piano or guitar first. I hated it and put it away because it wasn't what I wanted. And then I like floundered for years. And then I was like 17, 18 years old and met a bunch of kids that were like in a punk rock band.
Yep.
And I'm like, I play drums. No, right? And they're like, yeah, we need a drummer. I'm like, oh yeah, I can do that. And then like went back to high school to the music teacher, was like, can I sit behind that kit? And then we found a kit and went like that.
Which is amazing.
Find a way, right?
Yeah, you find a way, and it doesn't, you acquire the skills as you develop, as you move along. Fake it till you make it.
100%.
The way of, so it's super interesting the way we hold on to these things throughout life. And I didn't know you were in a punk rock band. That's awesome.
Yeah, in the early '90s. Well, I used to play with like the Legger lads and those guys. I was in a band called Mayhem United, which Luther and Paul, the original bass player from Legger lads, were founding members along with myself and a female guitarist named Jill Bishop. And our lead singer was Lauren, and I can't remember Lauren's last name right now, and I'm so sorry. She's moved. She's like a kickboxer in Thailand now. She's like incredible. Like it's nuts.
Lauren, Italian woman?
No, she.
Italian?
I don't.
I think I may actually know this woman.
Oh, okay.
I think. Anyways.
Yeah, and anyway, so like we did that, and I played in other bands with like teenage or radioactive schoolgirls.
I love these names. The Lager Lads, the Radio.
Oh yeah, man! Like punk rock in the '90s in Windsor was fucking awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
It
absolutely.
was awesome. That was for me. It was. I looked around and like we were the outcasts of the outcasts. Like even the punk rock scene didn't want anything to do with us, right? So like I was always this. Sorry, I'm turning this about me, but like I was always this like outsider kid, and then I found this group of like outsider kids, and I was like, oh, punk rock. Okay, all right. What is this thing? And like got exploring it, and like all of a sudden I'm getting introduced to like the fucking Exploited and the Misfits. And what this fucking noise? Like I'm a radio. Oh yeah, and Black Flag and Henry Rollins, and then I started listening to like Jello Biafra doing spoken word, and then Henry Rollins started doing all of his spoken word stuff like that, and I was just like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like this is what they do?
Yeah, then you realize the very political elements of music and punk rock, which is, marginal still has its own political perspective, which I love that. But music, like, what I think to tie this all together, music is community, really. In many ways. Whatever community you happen to fall into, music is community, and that has always been a kind of, admittedly, a driving element for me too, because in places where you're implanted and you don't know anybody or anything, music is a foothold. It's a community that you will be a part of.
It's funny because like even on this tour, right, like the first thing that George and I said, like every time we go into, we want to go and take a look at and see what's happening in the music scene, like where's the bar that has an open jam or whatever, and we were able to do that in St. Catharines. And like just walking in, you looked around and went like, oh, this is Fog. Yeah. This is TVX. This is this is these places where these people gather, and it's like you're at home wherever you go.
Yeah.
So all right, so you get into the big city, man.
Yeah. So big city. Lived in a couple of different places.
I was asking you about how you got involved in art and music. Like you had the crew that you met, the metalheads that you met back in Kingsville.
Yeah, and then I always gravitated towards, I guess, the oddballs in many ways. I never was all that interested in this is the whatever crew of people. It just wasn't for me. So I always fell in with what I found to be interesting people. My first roommates when I moved to Windsor. Actually, I lived in a place right on trying to remember the name, Almer, right off of Wyandotte, kind of that area with Six Langman. I lived with him way back in the day. Chad Weigel. Yeah.
Well, Six. I don't know if you know this or not, but Six was like our videographer.
You were saying. Yeah. So very ties. We don't even realize it's the first time I've met you, but we have.
I actually think you and I have been in a room a couple of times together, like through Christian. I think we've like randomly bumped into each other like 10 or 12 years ago.
Not just possible, but likely.
Right.
So I was always, even when I wasn't in the early years going to college and stuff there, I wasn't making music. I wasn't doing much in a creative way. No, I kind of focused on my scholastic endeavors, and then I think.
Were you a bookworm kid? Because like you were locked away in the county. Is that where you sort of like started diving into education, or was that something that came before that?
I think even before that, I've always, when I was 7 or 8 years old, the Chronicles of Narnia. I think I devoured the entire series in a summer, and like, you know, so the old readathons, I look back on this and I'm like, this is really, you know, it encourages reading and literacy, and this side has always been, you know, something I hold near and dear. I'm actually, you know, looking at ways I can give back and help, you know, adult literacy in my community now. Okay. But still, I'm, you know, my wife and I are struggling with not enough bookshelves right now.
Yeah, you're like, one of those guys.
Yeah, right? It's like we need to do something about this. So I've always been in many ways kind of bookish, and have a love of language and the written word. Yeah. So
what did you study when you were in school?
Chemical engineering.
Okay. Yeah. Why chemical engineering of all things?
Well, you know, so I have this. Admittedly, and maybe I hope I'm not revealing too much, but growing up in a degree of growing up in a, you know, a degree of, I guess, what would be considered poverty or, you know, precarity. There was a point at which, you know, at the end of high school, you know, I was doing well in English, I was doing well in science, and like, what do I do? And you know, unfortunately, I look back and I think, well, I do want to make a living. I don't want to be poor. And I just saw, you know, the chemical industry, this side of things, as, okay, this is a way I can make a living, I believe. And that's evolved over time. You know, sure. At the end of college, I was like, oh, I want to work more on drug development. Mm-hmm. This is an interest. Biochemistry, obviously, I felt, okay, well, chemistry, yeah, it's hugely impactful in the world, but biology, biochemistry, to me, that's where there's a certain magic and mystery here, you know. Right. And I was like, I wanted to understand that better. So I kind of, after college, shifted as I went to university in a little bit of a different direction. But once I was back in university, I kind of got back into the creative side of things. I was living with some other people, Chad Weigel still, but some other people who played music, had a drum set, I believe, in the basement. And this is where we started to get back into it. Okay. And then, you know, when I really dropped back in was with Tyson Golnitz, Brian Enns, and Eric Arner. We had a band called the Dollies. Okay. And this was, I think, my first band, my first serious band. Yeah. Actually, we had a recording, and I was like, you know, looking back on it, I'm like, I was such a hack, you know, like, you know, playing in a band. I had really no business, but I was like, yeah, let's, like you, like, I play drums. Yeah, I play drums. I can do this. And had no idea of, you know, touch, timing, meter, all of these elements of drum. I'm just like, yeah, I can play.
But that's particularly why drummers are the bravest.
Yes, yeah, we do throw ourselves out there. Yeah. we can kind of
do that.
Some of us never developed that skill. I'm still a punk rock drummer.
It's skill is one of those open-ended things.
Right.
We continue to develop for our entire life, hopefully. So yeah, that was.
So when you say it was your first serious band, and I love these stories, what did that mean at the time? What did first serious band at a college mean for you guys?
Meant regular practices. Didn't mean showing up not hungover. Both what it meant and what it didn't mean. But it was like, yeah, it was a bunch of guys that I connected with, and we were making songs. We tried to craft songs. Let's do this consistently, and then and we actually recorded, which was that was my first experience recording, and it was an awesome experience.
Did you guys do it yourself, or did you go to a studio?
No, we went to a studio. We actually went up to Hamilton, and Sonic Onion had some of the guys from there. There was a warehouse. It was a friend of ours. I'm trying to remember his last name. His first name was Sean, but I can't remember his last name for the life of me. Super good guy, also from the county, from Kingsville in this area. And we went and recorded with him in this. It was a giant warehouse, you know, so really spacious. Kind of just set up soundboards, did it all live off the floor. There was a nest of raccoons in the wall that was, you know, I couldn't see them, but it sounded like they were procreating or something. And we managed to record this as we're in the studio and wove it into parts of the album, actually. And, you know, we actually
I believe Guns N' Roses did something similar.
Yeah. You know, like, the studio is a place of magic. You have to be open to it and capture what comes along, you know.
Right.
So yeah, that was a super formative experience for me, and kind of, I think, cemented it that like I love playing music, I love recording, I love hearing this back, I love having this mirror, and also being able to play for people. You know, sometimes at the end of it, when we're kind of like actually okay, we've kind of found ourselves here. The band seemed to get a pretty decent response with some of the music we had. So, but then of course, shortly thereafter, the creative arc and people just go their separate ways. So,
how long were you guys together?
A couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what was your path after that?
I think after that, so playing with Eric Arner was great. He's an amazing player. He's actually a music teacher up north now.
Is he?
Yeah, and he had his class. I got to give props to this guy. He had his class. He taught them. He took I think it was an Aphex Twin song, one of the kind of ambient ones, and he had his class perform this song.
Okay.
For their school thing, and I'm just like, right on, bringing up the next generation the right way, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he started. Actually, I'm not sure. I think it actually came afterwards. Steph Copeland, you might. I know Matt Rideout has worked with her, and you may end up talking about her. But she, I saw her perform in Windsor, and I was kind of blown away. Like, she was just such an amazing voice, and especially at a young age, the talent and maturity that she brought to her music, both in the performance of it, but also in the lyrical content. I was just like, this is really cool. And so I have deep appreciation for music, and then somehow, strangely, again, you just fall into these things.
Right.
You're like, oh, she was forming a band or something, and Eric had mentioned my name, and so we ended up playing together.
Oh, okay.
You know, and which for me, really having to change my style a little bit, pull back a little, because it was more of about the front woman, her songs, her music, her voice. So played with them then for a couple of years, and which was really amazing.
That's
and,
great. Tour around or locally?
We did a little bit of touring, actually. We had gone to London, played at the Alex P. Keaton. This is an interesting story, because like years and years later, we played with a band called Arctic. And it was a guy, they were actually from Vancouver at the time, and they were touring. We played with them, we opened up for them, and I was like, oh, these guys are good. Guy had a giant pedal board, kind of ethereal shoegaze type stuff.
Right.
And, I picked up a shirt, one of their shirts, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And that was at, I think I saw them both in Windsor, and then we played with them at the Alex P. Keaton in London. And years and years and years later, I'm seeing this other band from Toronto here called the Battle of Santiago, and their guitarist, I ended up talking to him afterwards, and just talking, had kind of connected. I think we connected on Facebook, and he said, hey, do you want to form a band? And after sitting down and talking to him, he mentioned his band Arctic, and I'm like, dude, I played with you back in 2006, you know? And we found footage online from show of him playing, and there I am standing there watching him drinking a beer, and I was just like,
"That's cool."
The world is so
man.
small, and you touch, you form contacts with people, daily, ritually, and never understanding when they might actually become more of a substantial element of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So
talk to me about your move into education and being because you're a researcher. Talk to me about what it is that you research, and because I understand your knowledge base is kind of you're one of those you know a little bit about everything kind of guys.
Well, I appreciate that you say that.
That's tough to be thrown at. I know.
I feel like I know very little about anything.
Of course you do. That's the first sign of somebody who actually knows some shit.
Yeah. So coming out of college, it was very much. I studying chemistry. I'm like, okay, this is all right. But where the real interest and where I thought the real kind of mystery was is the chemistry of the body.
Okay.
So that's when I kind of took that turn, and I started studying biochemistry. I ended up, after I finished my undergraduate, I went back and I did a PhD with one of the guys who taught me, this guy Bülent Mutis, a little Turkish guy who did, I would say he did enzymology and photochemistry.
Okay, I understand photochemistry.
Yeah.
What's the other thing you said?
Enzymology is the study of enzymes.
Oh, I guess I could have probably put that together.
Yeah, but it's really, it's kind of nailing them down and their characteristics and kind of place in evolution, and so I did my PhD with him, and then, really, again, this goes back to the, being inundated with a fire hose of knowledge. You learn, I think, often many years after you study.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or you can study something for a number of years, and all the kind of insights, the real intuitive elements, and like, oh, I see now. Often comes the revelations come years later. So, I did my PhD with him. Hopefully, I learned some stuff, and from there I went on and I got more interested. So we did some work with proteins and enzymes, and that's when I kind of realized, I really like the world of proteins, and it's kind of vast and huge and very different from the DNA world. So I kind of went in that direction, and went to Boston, and I worked.
How so? And this is probably too big of a question to ask in this sort of format, but like. The few conversations I've had with people that deal with biochemistry, because it's an area that it just starts at a knowledge base I just can't access. But when the people I have talked to in that field have always dealt DNA stuff. As a matter of fact, the question that was loaded in my head was like, oh, so you must have done like DNA work. So what is the, like, fundamentally, what are the differences in the?
Well, fundamentally, so you can always think of the DNA as the script.
Okay.
It's the static script. The script doesn't change, right? It's really the book from which everything is derived, the repository of information, whereas the proteins are really, they are the spoken word coming from the actors. Right?
Okay.
Proteins are the actors of the biological world.
Okay.
DNA.
So the proteins are the expressions of the genes from the DNA.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. That's very good. That's a very good way to put it.
Okay.
And we say exactly that. Proteins are expressed from DNA.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a good distinction there. So we really, we are kind of at the maturity, I wouldn't say the zenith of the genomic age, but really we're mapping entire genomes now.
Mm-hmm.
The price of mapping a genome,
I know, it's ridiculous, right?
So we can kind of
the first one was like $8 billion or something, and took like 9 years, now they do 52 in an hour and a half for $100 in a lab or something.
Exactly. The technology, this is one of those areas where the technology has just like moved exponentially faster throughout the last 20 years, I would say.
What is it that we're like? We are. See, I've done the team thing.
You're part of humanity.
That's
right.
I'm a human.
Yes,
almost.
I can take credit for this.
What is it that you learn from? What is it that you learn from mapping the genome? What, like, that research, as you're trekking down those fields, like the little bits that I know, the one part that I was like, I'm gonna argue with the guy who knows stuff and I don't. But like you said, that DNA is being a script. The only thing I know about DNA is that it does change. Like, that's the only thing we're looking for is the mutations, and I'm probably talking way out of my. But like, every time you copy that DNA, the idiot making the copy makes a mistake. And however many times that mistake gets copied, if it doesn't kill you before you reproduce, it moves on.
Yeah, well, so kind of you're right. You're absolutely right in many ways. But the normally DNA, the idea is that it's a static repository and it doesn't change. And when it does change, that's when we come up with real problems. Especially at like the germline level. You can have somatic mutations that kind of change things and can lead to cancer, and but germline mutations can lead to super serious diseases. So mapping that out is kind of knowing what's there. How has the change occurred? What is the actual change? But then understanding how the change actually alters biology is an entirely different question.
I'm very much guessing here, but I'm guessing like something like this is being dangerous by getting specific, but say like Huntington's disease, because it's the one they talk about when they talk about this stuff. I almost imagine that once you have that piece of information in the script, the way that it expresses itself changes dramatically based on the individual that has that issue, even though it's doing the same thing. Does that?
No,
or am I overcomplicating?
I think, yeah, there's a little bit of, well, there's a degree of, you can harbor a mutation and it not be expressed.
Okay.
So it doesn't cause a problem. But these diseases, I believe Huntington's also I believe it's a monogenic disease, like cystic fibrosis. These diseases that come from very specific changes in the genome at in a specific protein often. So that in those cases, once that's changed, it's the same. It's the same. That's why, cystic fibrosis in one person manifests very similarly to.
And that happens more in the protein than it does at the genetic level?
Well, it happens at the genetic level, but the genetic level dictates the change at the protein level.
Okay.
So, for instance, cystic fibrosis, I believe it's a chloride channel that's involved in mucous membranes, and so when that chloride channel doesn't function properly, you get an imbalance in the ionic state within the cell, and then the mucous membrane change, and that's why they have in their lungs often will accumulate mucus, and it becomes very hard for them to breathe properly, and so it manifests. Some of these are simple.
Sure, of course. If they,
I
already was lost twice, so thank you.
But it can, then we get into the complexity. One of the most interesting things is as I went through studying at the university level, I studied immunology, and that's when my mind was kind of blown. You have this complex system, and one of the revelations I had during that time is that you will have cancer 20 times potentially before you actually develop cancer.
Okay.
And your body's simply capable of addressing that, surveying, detecting, and then eliminating that cancer before you actually,
I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the major, the Nobel Prize in medicine. One of the prizes was given out for this idea of these. I'm going to get too deep into it here, so I'm also going to pull us back. But exhaustion markers, and in the immune system, where it's kind of the brakes get put on the immune system after a certain point when it's just like, okay, we can't deal with this.
Doesn't have the energy to keep. Okay.
Yeah, like for instance, a cancer that just keeps regenerating, the immune system's like, okay, I thought we dealt with this, and then after it's time, it's like, okay, we can't deal with this anymore. So one of the major discoveries of the last 15 years or so, and they gave out a Nobel Prize for it, is that there's actually molecules in the cells of the immune system that essentially put brakes on the immune system, and if you can block those, you can take the brakes off of the immune system and basically reactivate the immune system to deal with cancers. And they've had some like really groundbreaking developments. Say for instance, it's a form of skin cancer, serious form of melanoma, exactly. It's very difficult to treat.
Right.
But with this basically new development, they've had some very striking results. So it's like this.
Is that the research you're involved in, or is that just research you're aware of?
Research I'm aware of, I'm loosely involved in.
Okay, so what is mostly the research that you work on?
So after going to Boston, I studied protein microarrays, and got into the world of antibodies through autoantibodies involved in like diabetes and other organ-specific autoimmune diseases. But after that, I was like, okay, antibodies are really interesting. So what we do now is I work with a guy who developed essentially a way to generate antibodies that does not require the use of animals.
Oh, okay.
So back in the 70s, there's a couple of guys who developed this very, very savvy kind of way of generating antibodies by inoculating mice, pulling their B cells, their antibody-producing cells out of the mouse, fusing them with a cancer cell that would divide ad nauseum, ad infinitum, and produce antibodies of a single clonal specificity. Which allowed us to basically harness the power of antibodies for biomedical science. So now we do this without animals, which I think is, as scientists, we have an ethical obligation that if we don't need to use animals for something, we shouldn't.
Right.
But I've also seen, it's been very interesting to see the interplay of the world of politics and ethics and money and kind of the pushback, because some interesting insights and experiences that I had, but to kind of draw a loop around this is really what we're engaged in now. What I'm engaged in now is mostly engineering antibodies, developing antibodies to different targets, and then looking at trying to determine whether or not they have therapeutic potential. Really, antibodies are a novel, relatively novel. I think the first one was patented in the mid-1980s, and since then have become one of the fastest growing segments of the pharmaceutical industry.
That's fascinating. Does this stuff, and now I'm dangerously close to just like, and now's the time of the show when we just repeat shit you heard on Joe Rogan. But like, does this stuff have anything to do with like, or is this anywhere near like the CRISPR stuff or the?
Yeah, well, not.
Because CRISPR is more specifically DNA, right?
Yes, okay. Exactly. You're knocking things out with CRISPR. You're knocking things out often. Sometimes I think also knocking them in. So it's been a way to do. Actually, we do some work with a lab that works specifically with CRISPR and CRISPR libraries. So essentially, they'll apply these libraries, try to knock stuff out, and see what effect it has on the cells. But yeah, that's a very interesting area right now.
Super interesting, right? Because it's got all kinds of like it's one of the fun ones where people get to go, you're gonna create fucking monsters.
Yeah, exactly. And really, what that is, the other side of that is the technology is by far outpacing the legal controls, the ethical controls, even the ethical considerations. I think especially with CRISPR, scientists have realized, hey, this is a powerful technology, but we need to, before we use it to address, like what we were saying with some of these monogenic diseases, if you can basically target a single gene, you also have the opportunity to correct a disease before, at the stage of embryo, where this person could then go on and have a perfectly normal life. So it's powerful technology used ethically, but it's also like, okay, well, here's the gene for blue eyes. I want my child to have blue eyes, and it's like, well, is that an ethical use of that technology if there's a risk?
Do you think the conversation about that is any different than, say, if like when electricity was first being used like as a thing that you could get out to the public? Well, it can power a light bulb, or you can kill people with it.
Yeah.
Like, isn't it kind of the same argument?
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. Technology, I'm not going to say that it's ethically neutral entirely, but it really depends on how it's used. Like, no matter nuclear technology, electricity, genetic technologies, it all comes down to how is it going to be used. And the thing is, there are those who say, well, we need to use the technology for the betterment of humanity. And, up to a certain point in medical technologies, if we look back to, say, the discovery of insulin, that was never patented. Right? They said, this is something amazing for humanity. This is what we give back.
Here you go.
Right? Yeah. Whereas nowadays, the patent world is so almost integrated with the world of discovery and the world of innovation that really I think it's shifted to, well, how can we derive economic benefit from this technology? So which changes the ethics of it a little bit, because making money with certain risks, obviously becomes a little bit of an ethical conundrum.
It's because of the field, and I mean the entire history of science is sort of like fraught with that. I think 90% of the reason why, religion hung on for so long is because like science is kids playing with stuff that go boom, right? Like, and I wonder how much of just being in that kind of a world where like, and I might be putting too fine a point on it, and it's really tough to have the perspective of the way I'm going to put this, but it's like you work in this world where like there are only a select amount of human beings that can even understand. Like I've gotten lost in our conversation 3 times. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's only no. It's not. It's my lack of understanding, but there's only a select amount of human beings that can really talk about this stuff, really understand what the fuck you're talking about. Like really, like, yeah, I understand the subtleties and the nuances and the variance of all of this stuff. So you're in this place where like most of humanity looks at you people, right, as like fucking scary. But it's also the stuff that you're doing is far more important for all of us who are afraid of you than you could possibly understand. How do you is there a perspective on that? Is that a thing you have to deal with, or is it just like, oh, I'm doing what I'm doing, like whatever?
Well, like I'm personally under no illusions. I understand that there's people out there who know far more than I do about what I do.
Great. So there's a smaller circle of the small circle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think science, the representation of science in in greater society can go in various directions. There's on one side of it, there's the science will save us, the technological kind of fetishism that's like no matter what the problem is, there will be a technological solution, which I think is a huge problem in society. But then there's the other side of society that's like, vaccines are bad, all GMO is bad, and I'm like, unfortunately.
Well, you're eating your strawberry that is a GMO because it was not naturally grown like that.
Potentially, or even broccoli, which was bred over hundreds of years to actually what it is, which is also a form of genetic modification.
That's what I meant by the strawberry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's and it pains me on both sides to see both the technological fetishism, where it's like, oh, so that everything has a technological solution, because it doesn't. You know what? And sometimes the technological innovations come with their own set of problems, novel problems that are going to have to be solved at some point. We see that with plastics nowadays. Plastics back in the 50s and 60s were just like
they're going to save the world.
Everything.
Remember the new modern kitchen where everything like rose out of everything was mechanical, and there was and then they realized, oh, that shit breaks down.
Yeah, exactly. And then plastics and everything made out of plastics. That's just like So
I mean, we have a nice new island.
Yeah. Maybe someday people will live there.
Right. Yeah. Just need a little more plastic. What's the problem?
So, but on the other side of that is the fear of science completely, and it's about having these discussions, and this is where I would love to see. And I think I have a duty towards scientific literacy as well, to talk with people, and not to talk to them in a condescending, your exclusive manner, but talk to them in a as understanding a manner as possible, so that we can kind of see that we need to have nuanced discussions about all of these things. Plastics, some people, plastics are good, blah blah. Well, yeah, they have their place, but as we see now, as they break down into the environment and bioaccumulate and are found in most of our bodies, like, well, what's the effect of that? Turning a blind eye to it and saying, oh, it doesn't matter. It's not a good plan. And same thing with vaccines. Yes, I understand there's vaccines for a multitude of things. We have to weigh things. And, unfortunately, the level of discussion nowadays that's fomented by social media is often, I find, very, it's not very open. You know what I mean? I saw.
Well, don't you know that science says that people who swear are geniuses?
Anytime I read something that science says, I'm just like, hey, yeah. I'm like, well, which part of science? Right. Who's saying this? What's their, this is where, what is their angle, and who are they affiliated with? Where are they getting their funding from? All of these things to understand, try and,
Yeah.
But that's, that's a level of, I guess, perspective that unfortunately the vast majority of the world doesn't have.
Right.
So I always liked, if I have the opportunity to have a discussion like that with somebody, to kind of lay that out. I saw a talk recently. This was the Monk debates that they had in Toronto. Jordan Peterson,
Steven Pinker?
Stephen Lewis. Yeah, he's the British comedian, and then a couple of other people. But he, at one point, he said something that was kind of one of the more profound and concrete things that I took away from that talk was we're, as a society, he said, he feels that we're losing our ability to speak about ideas.
This is Peterson?
Playfully. No, that wasn't Peterson.
Okay.
That was he was on stage with Peterson.
Okay.
It was Stephen, I'm pretty sure it was Stephen Lewis. And we're losing the ideas as a society to speak about ideas playfully, to adopt an idea or to hold an idea without necessarily saying, I'm committed to this idea. This idea is right, and you know what I mean.
Interesting.
To say, hey, I can, to explore the idea.
Yeah, because you do that. Yeah, because like as you're coming up as a kid, that's kind of what you do, right? You latch onto an idea, you see if it fits a little bit, you take what does, and you get rid of what doesn't, and that you're playing with concepts at that point, right?
Exactly, which is really important in development, I think. You know, and even once developed, is really important in fleshing out ideas, especially if these ideas are foundational to society and the direction that it's going in.
Well, I've often thought that like it's really, really important in society to let people be wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the biggest issue that we have in our society right now. It's that scarlet letter mentality where like if I see you, if you do something that I don't agree with, I'm going to call you out. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to stand up for what I believe, which is a great thing to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Until you standing up is standing on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's funny because like you brought up Peterson and he's such what's the like
polarizing.
Yeah, he's so polarizing and like I mean he's in this city, right? So like I don't know if you've worked with him or met him or whatever, but like he's one of those figures that right now especially like I've seen him talk and always thought he was and thought most of what he had to say was brilliant. I don't necessarily agree with everything he has to say, which is true of every human being. But like to hear some people talk about him, it's like, gee, I didn't realize I was listening to Hitler. Like
yeah,
it's
and this is a reflexive way of vilifying people that's been adopted, and it's not helpful. It's like talk about his ideas. This is where I like, in the world of discussing ideas, I don't want to talk about right or left. I'd rather talk about what are your values. Mm-hmm. What's the and I've pushed people on this many times. Where righty, lefty, and I'm like, you want to call names? That's not a discussion for me.
Right.
You want to talk about values and what is the value here? Is the value is human flourishing? Let's talk about this. And does this contribute to human flourishing? Do you think this? Do you think? And I personally I like the Socratic method. Ask questions.
Right.
Questions can be just as illuminating as being illuminated.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. We're almost at the end of this, which is great, but I've had this one question that's sort of been sitting in the back of my mind the entire time we talk. With the work that you do, hi Christian. With the work that you do, when it comes to DNA and gene expression and that, and you see the variation of what happens to biology at that level.
Yeah.
Have you spent any time doing the connection to what humans and creativity and music and art, like have you made any of those jumps, or is it two separate things for you?
Yeah, that's I have to admit the world of music and creativity is a little bit, they're kind of separate worlds a little bit for me, because music is a little bit of catharsis and release and kind of the other side of things. But yeah, that's a good question,
Because to me, it almost seems like if you take exactly what you said about DNA and the proteins being expressed, and call you as a person the DNA, and then what we create out of us as the expression. Have you thought of it as like the expression of the expression? Like if you I would resist being deterministic about it. Like it's something innate in our biology that but maybe I would suggest rather that it's more of a spiritual thing that's
kind of we're imbued with at some certain point. Some people are hungry to be creative, and others less so. So
it's so interesting to me that you went to spiritual on that.
Well, it's like where does it come from? Why do people even if why do people suffer to create? Some people go through a lot of hardship to be able to do what they want. I know people like this right now who have a job that they don't like, that just barely keeps them going so that they can continue to create and do what they want. So that's something, in humans innately, maybe I won't go so far as to say uniquely human, but I wouldn't say there's many animals in the animal
I've
kingdom
seen some
that
elephants paint.
Yeah. Higher organisms, I would say, have a creative element, but
right.
It's, that's something that's where does that come from? Why do some people's creativity taper off after high school and others, go on? And
you're pretty sure that through all the research, nobody's going to find the painter gene?
I would be highly skeptical if anybody wanted to report that.
Right.
There's lots who love to be sensational and kind of, say, Eureka, I have the solution. But yeah, that's the beauty of scientific inquiry, is it's you've got to lay out your cards and let other people see what you're doing to see whether or not they actually believe you've done what you said you've done.
Shane, it's been a pleasure, man. I'm sure we could sit here and talk about 600,000 other things about.
I feel like we barely tipped the iceberg.
It's been a pleasure, man.
Likewise.
Maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Before we take off here, folks, you can make sure to head downstairs there and click on any of the links to find more information about Shane, more information about us, all our social media, and of course our wonderful sponsors like Miersch Runners, who gives us their shirts. Thanks, guys. And of course, there's some videos next to us there. You can look at those, and while you're downstairs, make sure you hit on that subscribe button, and of course, click the bell for your notifications so you can find out what we're doing and all the new videos. All right, folks, we will see you next time. That'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. Don't forget, you can subscribe to our full audio episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find your audio podcasts. The full episodes, highlights, and our live off-the-floor performance videos can be found at our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the AVB Podcast. Of course, you'll find links to our incredible sponsors and this week's guest in the description below. The AVB Podcast is part of the Border City Network. Find more great content at bordercitynetwork.com. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.